Whenever we would like to understand meaning of a word, meaning of anything, so the best way to approach that idea is by looking at its etymological meaning. By etymological meaning, we mean that you look up in the dictionary or on the internet the meaning of that particular word. So in order to understand what communication means, we will first look at the meaning of the word communication. When we come to the meaning of the word communication, we come to know about its origin from Latin. There is a word in Latin called communicare. This Latin word's meaning in English was to share. But there are other words also which mean to share. For instance, in Latin itself, there is another word called communicatio or communicatio. There is a word in French which is known as communication. In short, communication means to share. Whenever we talk about communication, we should understand its meaning as sharing something. Now let us see what is it that we can share that the communication refers to. For instance, meanings. We share meanings, which means whatever we do, there is a meaning attached to it. So we share that also. We also share messages. Messages in themselves also contain meanings. Because if you don't understand meaning of a message, then it means you don't understand it. So we share meanings, we share messages, we also share ideas. How are you going to share that idea? You will share it by communicating the idea with somebody else. For instance, you will talk about it with your friends, you will talk about it with your teachers, you also share information. So the act of giving that information is actually what we understand as communication. We also share with each other feelings. Feelings could be any sort of feelings. Feelings between, let's say, parents and children, right? Feelings between friends. You share feelings of anger also. You share feelings of happiness. When we come to understand that communication means to share, and we traced its origin back to its Latin and French words where it meant to share, then we come to know what is it that we share through communication: meanings, messages, ideas, information, and feelings. Now, when we come to know that communication means to share ideas, feelings, information, etc. So there has to be a method of communication also. So what is the method of communication? There are several methods. First, let's deal with it as what is the correct method and what is the incorrect method of communication. Let's first deal with the incorrect method of communication or incorrect communication. So what is the incorrect communication? We come to know that in society there are gradations. In society there are differentiations. There are upper levels, there are lower levels. So these kind of sectioning has been done in the society. Somehow it is not a good thing, but somehow it exists. That's a reality. Ideally we should not follow that, but that's a reality with which we deal with every day. So communication also is placed under the same thing. That is, it also undergoes gradations. For instance, communication between parents and children. In that, parents are above children, so they will be above and children will be a little lower. It will dictate the way of communication, but we are not going to say this as correct way of communication if only the parent is speaking, if the person who is above you that is speaking. So that is not the correct way of communication. Even if two people are equal to each other, even there If only one person is speaking, only one person is communicating, and another one is only listening. So that is not the correct way of communication, because this sort of communication shows one-sidedness. Communication will not be called communication if it is one-sided. Why? Because communication should be two-sided. That is, from one to another and then from another to one. When only one is speaking, another one is only listening to that person, another one is only receiving the communication, then it also shows inequality. We are not calling it a communication. As far as communication is concerned, we will call it incorrect way of communication, because one is speaking, another is listening only, and it shows the inequality. Now see the correct way of communication. Communication in itself brings equality in society also, in our interpersonal relationships also, relationships between parents and children. The correct way of communication is when one is speaking and the another one is listening, and after listening, that person who was listening to the speaker, then that person gives the feedback. One speaks, another one listens, then the other one responds to the speaker, and the speaker then listens to the person who was earlier listening. This way we come to know that communication is actually a two-way process. It is not one way. It has never been one way. Communication's objective is also to elicit response, to make another person respond to you. If communication is not creating the response, then it is not communication. So when we have the communication in the correct way, then it shows the equality. The objective of communication is that it has to bring equality in the society. It has to bring equality in interpersonal relationships. So the correct way of communication shows that both the people are speaking, but not simultaneously. Because if you will speak simultaneously, then it will be quarrel. Communication's objective is also to eliminate quarrel between people, and that can be done when you do the communication correctly. If someone is speaking, you listen to it, and when that person has spoken, you give the feedback. Another very important thing that we should remember is the act of communication, the process by which we are transferring or conveying that information or feeling or idea to another person. That is exactly called the act of communication. But we must remember that this act of communication has a shape. We are viewing it in terms of a circular shape. Why we are calling it a loop-like or a circular shape? Because it is happening between two parties or several parties, and it does not stop. I speak to you, you respond, then the response that I got from you, then I will respond to that response, and then you will respond to what I had responded to, right? So it will continue, and because it will continue, it forms a sort of a loop or a circle. As far as shape of communication is concerned, we see it as circular in nature. So the act of communication, the very process when you are sharing the information or feelings, that very act of communication is circular. let's call context a sort of an area, a sphere. So for instance, this class is a sort of a context. This area of the class is a sort of a context. And in this, if the act of communication will occur, for instance, right now, the act of communication is happening because I am informing you, I am giving you some sort of knowledge. But what if you only understood French and I only understood English? So your language of communication is only French and my language of communication is only English. So do you think some sort of a communication can occur between us? Not at all, right? Because it is not creating a context. Within this area of the class, there are two types of languages. One is English, in which something is being passed on to those listeners who know only French. The act of communication will not be completed because you will not receive it because you don't know English. That will be contextless, which means when there are two people or the communicators who have different languages, so the act of communication will not occur between them, and because of that we will call it contextless. The context is composed of a language. The language should be similar to both the listeners and the speaker. It is composed of a language, and in this, communicator's language should be same. So in the context of this class, in the context or in this area of the class, if we have to initiate the act of communication, then the language of communication should be same. The act of communication can only occur within a context. It cannot be contextless. It cannot occur outside the area of the context. Okay, so outside the area will be contextless. The types of communications that I'm going to tell you, they all overlap. First type of communication that we understand is verbal communication. It is spoken. For instance, right now, the type of communication which is happening in the class is verbal communication. Because it is spoken, that's why it is orally sent to others. So all the information and knowledge that you are receiving right now, I am sending it to you, I am conveying it to you orally. And verbal communication mostly occurs face to face. So the communication which is happening face to face, it is a verbal communication. So it happens face to face. And if I would allow you to give the feedback will be immediate. The response of the listener is quick. What is important in verbal communication is the way you speak. That is speech. Speech is very important. You need to keep your pitch sometimes high. Like right now, my pitch is high. Why it is high? Because it's a large class, and as a communicator, my voice should reach to the end of the class itself. That is the student who is sitting at the end also, right? So that's why I need to modulate the pitch of my voice according to the range or the size of the listeners, right? So that's why I have to be loud but clear also. And in verbal communication, another important element that we come to know is careful listening. The responsibility of the listener is to carefully listen, to be attentive to what is going on in the class or wherever the act of communication is happening, especially when it is face to face, especially when it is verbal. Next type we have defined as non-verbal communication. So non-verbal communication will mean when we send or receive messages without the use of the words, without even speaking also. For instance, through body movements. if you want to show your anger, you can show it through your facial expressions. That's the non-verbal communication that you are conveying your anger through. You send or receive messages without the words, through body movements, through facial expressions, sometimes through eye contact, sometimes through personal appearance also, sometimes through personal space also. And non-verbal communication is also conveyed through the touch. Sometimes bad touch, sometimes good touch. And signs. So for instance, the traffic signal. Red light means you are supposed to stop your vehicle, right? Yellow means you're supposed to look around, be cautious, and green means that you need to go, right? So through these three different signs, you understand what is being communicated. After the non-verbal communication comes the written form of communication, and you might recognize that the written form of communication is the oldest form of communication. For instance, the writing of the letters. So you can communicate through the letters. In the form of letter, you can send your communication. Similarly, through emails, you can send your communication. And similarly, faxes can be used for the written communication. And in today's time, in technological time, instant messages and social media is also there for sending your communication through SMSs, instant messages, text messages, WhatsApp messages, Facebook. In short, not only that, you can communicate through the written medium of communication without the use of technology, but you can also communicate through the technology. That is, the written form of communication can be used in both the forms. When we talk about formal communication, so formal communication is sort of an exchange of information through the predefined medium. What is the predefined medium? In the informal communication, the predefined medium is the letter. Let's say if you want to communicate in a formal situation, you will have to write a letter. And next thing that you understand about it is that it has a slow pace. Suppose you want to convey something to, let's say, head of the institute. So you will have to write a letter, and after writing the letter, you will submit it to your department perhaps, because it will go through the department, and then your head will look at it or sign it, and then some office person will convey it to the head of the institute's office, and then it will reach there. So it has a slow pace, and in most cases you will see that the form of this formal communication is documentary. That is, it creates documents. It is conveyed in the form of documents, and it is believed that the secrecy is maintained. Then comes the informal way of communication. So in the informal communication, exchange of information happens through those mediums which are not predefined, and the pace that these mediums of communication has, the informal ones, the pace is very fast. That is, you can use emails, you can talk to each other face to face, right? In the informal setup, the form may not be documentary, and it is also not sure whether secrecy is maintained or not. Next is the visual communication. So what do we do in visual communication? In visual communication, ideas or information, they are transmitted through the visuals. For instance, the traffic signal. What does the traffic signal indicate to you? What does the traffic signal communicate to you? For instance, the red light will indicate stop. Yellow will indicate that you are supposed to be cautious in traffic, okay, and the green will indicate that you need to move. So this way, through the visuals of these different colors, you come to understand that something is being communicated. But as we've already understood that communication can occur only within a context. So the context of the traffic rules, only there these colors red, yellow and green will function. So you have to remember that the meanings function within only a context. The visual communication also functions within that particular context. So traffic signal has particular context, they have their own rules and regulations. Language functions within a context, and communication can occur only within a context. And visual communication can also occur only within a context. What does this visual communication include? It includes signs, it includes graphics, it includes advertisements, it includes symbols, it includes colors. So all these elements can be used for communicating to somebody visually. We move to another direction. The direction is how to develop your communication skills. So the first thing is how we learn about communication. Obviously we learn about communication through our teachers. Primary person that will teach you communication, that person is the English teacher. So you learn about communication, you develop your communication skills by learning different rules and regulations, by participating in different activities led by your English teacher. You also learn about communication and develop your communication skills through reading books on communication. You will take the help of your library. You will also depend on the notes or lectures provided to you by your English teacher. And another important aspect in learning or developing your communication skills is asking of questions. By asking questions, not only you obtain the knowledge, because when somebody is going to answer your question, it will reveal something to you. So when you ask a question, not only you become knowledgeable if you get the answer, but you also learn to communicate by asking questions. Not only this, there is the practice part also involved. For the practice part, we have the lab classes, the practical classes. In the practical classes, we do different kind of activities. We practice whatever theory we learn in the theory class, and then we practice it to develop our communication skills. So the practice or the practicals involve discussions of lectures. You can discuss the lectures with your friends. Okay, you can discuss the lectures with your classmates, and you can also practice different activities in the class as well as outside class also. Next is the use of body. Use of body is also a way of communication, as we've already spoken when you do the non-verbal communication, right? So for instance, what are the things that you focus in the use of body for communication? For instance, the eye contact. What does the eye contact represent? Eye contact first of all represent engagement. That is, that when you make an eye contact, it means you are trying to engage the person. Okay, if you will not make an eye contact, then the audience will become disinterested. Audience will lose interest. When you talk to people, when you have an audience, then what you do is you make an eye contact while speaking with the people. And second thing is the use of gesture. What are gestures? Just like the hand movements that I am making. So through the hand movements, you can also communicate. When you talk to somebody or when you are addressing a large audience, you need to use the hand movements. So it also makes an impression. You cannot just talk to somebody like this. Okay, not like this. You have to move the hand. But movement of the body is not in the way that you are shaking or you are not still. You have to be still also. You cannot dance on your feet. You cannot vibrate your feet. You cannot tap your feet. There should be some sort of a compatibility between what you are speaking and what your hand gestures are indicating. The entire body's movement should actually convey this compatibility. There has to be compatibility. So in the body language, eye contact, hand gestures, and another element in the body movement is the smile. Smile is very important when interacting with people. Don't smile unnecessarily. Smile appropriately at appropriate moments. Okay, so smile can be used. Similarly, the posture, if you are in a sitting position, so the posture should be upright, not slouching like this back of the seat you must use. Another element is that you need to listen to others carefully. That is also required. So as far as speech and sound are concerned, the very basic rules are that when you speak clearly. There should not be mumbling. Don't mumble, okay? You speak clearly, right? And pronounce your words clearly, right? And for speaking clearly and for pronouncing your words clearly, you can take the help of dictionaries, because dictionaries will help you out in correct pronunciation. And suppose there is a word that you want to use, but you don't know the meaning of that word. So if that is the case, don't use that word, drop it. And another aspect is that in communication, never talk fast, right? As a learner you speak clearly but not very fast, right? And always be in command of your voice. You should be able to modulate your voice, sometimes in loud pitch, sometimes in lower pitch, okay? But you have to show that you are in command. So when you are speaking, show it that you are in command. Don't mumble. Now we come to the feedback. What is feedback? Feedback is a view of other people about your performance. So feedback is all that you receive for something you have done in front of other people. As far as class activities are concerned, so you ask for the feedback from your teacher. If you participated in a class activity, so you ask for how was your performance. You ask for what were your fault. Similarly, right, you can ask feedback not only from your teachers, but you can ask feedback from your friends, your classmates also. Not just about performance in the class, but also performance outside the class, about your personality, about how you behave with other people, right? How you conduct yourself in day-to-day life. So this way also you can ask for the feedback, right? And feedback, as far as feedback is concerned, feedback should be in the form of criticism. Feedback cannot be in the form of praise. Criticism here means positives and negatives, and the feedback that you get, you use that feedback for improving yourself. Sometimes you are put in a situation where you have to speak extemporaneously, which means without any idea of the topic that you are going to speak. So what you do is, especially in extempore speaking, and you jot down your points, right? The points or topics on which you would like to speak, you jot down those, but never memorize. Whenever there is an opportunity where you are going to speak spontaneously, extemporaneously, you are not supposed to memorize anything. What you are supposed to do is, you should rather speak like this, that you have topics, you have points written down in front of you, and you build on them, because it will create flexibility. And the points that you have jot down, those points should not be read out or spoken word for word. They are sort of an guide to you what you are going to speak. But obviously extempore speaking requires a lot of practice. For this you can use something called cue cards. So you can put some cue cards on which your points are there, and you just have a look at it and then do the extempore speaking. So extempore speaking is also a way to develop your communication skills. You will be given 5 minutes time or 2 minutes time. In that brief period of time, you will have to jot down your notes and points, etc. But suppose you are a big speaker, or suppose you have been invited to speak somewhere. So if you are that kind of a speaker who has been invited to speak somewhere, so before you go to speak, you need to know your audiences. How are you going to know the audiences? You need to speak to the organizers. What kind of audiences am I going to speak with? Are they the adults? Are they young children? Are they school going children? Are they college students? Are they university students? How educated are they? These kind of questions you should ask from your organizers, right? And depending on the type of the audience, you can adapt your speech. That is, you can talk about those topics, or modulate the content of your speech depending on the type of the audience. And humor is always good. You can use humor while speaking, right? But humor should be appropriate. It's not that you've gone for some sad meeting and over there you are cracking jokes. Now, other important aspects of communication that you must remember is anything that you are going to send as part of your communication. First thing that, especially the written one, whether electronically or in the hard copy. So the first thing that you are supposed to do is read and reread before sending the communication. It could be your SMS, text message, email, WhatsApp message, Facebook message, whatever sort of communication you are sending, you have to read and reread. Why do you need to do that? Because you have to check whether the message you are sending is appropriate or not. One thing. Secondly, you also check the typos. You need to check whether the spelling is correct. Okay? Because if you are sending your communication with typos, that is incorrect spelling, then it will not create a good impression of you, especially in the formal space. In informal space, sometimes perhaps it might not be affecting anything, right? And that's why it is suggested that you should never communicate in a haste. Okay? Do not hurry up while communicating, right? Anytime you communicate with somebody, review it before sending. Move to another aspect. This is a common problem in all of us. So the common problem is that whenever we want to communicate, especially in English, what happens is that we have this notion in our head that another person might judge us. It's a psychological problem. So you should first discard this idea that there is a judge on you. Okay? So develop this idea in your head that there is no judge in communication. As a learner, you will commit mistakes. It's very natural. So don't worry about that somebody will judge me. That's why I should not communicate at all. Why? First of all, people are so engrossed in themselves. People are so involved with themselves. People think mostly about themselves. So nobody is going to pay attention to if you have even committed a mistake. Hardly there will be anyone who will be judging you. Second thing that you must do is that when you talk to somebody, you should talk with free and relaxed mind. No tension at all. Okay, if your mind is free and relaxed, only then the confidence of talking with somebody else will come. So your mind should be free and relaxed while talking to other people. what did we learn in this lecture? First of all, communication is sharing of ideas, information and feelings, right? It is a two-way process. It is never a one-way process. Act of communication is loop-like or a circle, right? Communication can never occur without a context. There has to be a context, and communication is verbal, non-verbal, it is written, it is formal, it is informal, and it is visual also. Okay, and in order to develop communication skills, you need to learn theory and also practice it, right? You can communicate through your body, you can communicate, you also have to have command over your speech and sound. And the next idea is that you can also speak extemporaneously, and when you address an audience, you need to know the audience beforehand, and when you send any communication to anybody, you have to check and recheck, read and reread before sending the communication, and always keep in mind this idea that there is a judge sitting over you when you communicate. So there is no judge. Okay, thank you.